So the conclusion of all of this, and here I can ask you, I had put it aside depending on the time we have. I translated a sermon from Imam Ali alayhi salam in which he talks about death and with a lot of allusions to Alam al-Barzakh, but the majority of it is more of a, warnings and reminders for us. So I'll see if you guys are interested or not. It might take us 10, 15 minutes to go through the full sermon if we want to read it quickly without much commentary, just so that you're aware. So keep it in mind, I'll ask you at the end. In conclusion, so that we can wrap this topic up completely, okay, so that we move on to the next topic. The conclusion of all of this, the quick reminders, the quick highlights from all of this. The first one is that if we look at Alam al-Barzakh and what is at stake, what is at play, the difference between it and Alam al-Akhirah, and inshallah we're going to get into the details of Alam al-Akhirah in the next weeks, and you will see that very clearly. Alam al-Barzakh has much more to do with the big items of belief, the big tenets, not the details. The details, every iota, every minutiae of action or intention or thought, anything you do, anything you think about, all of that, you will be held accountable for it in the afterlife. Alam al-Barzakh is not meant for that. Alam al-Barzakh is meant for the big items of belief and the big items of action. Did you pray or not? They're not going to ask you, did you pray every single prayer, every single day? Did you pray this Salat al-Subh or not? Did you pray this Salat al-Dhuhr or not? This will be the afterlife. Alam al-Barzakh, not yet. Did you pray? Were you of those who prayed? Generally, were you of those who prayed? Were you of those who fasted? Were you of those who recited the Quran? Generally speaking. And you need to be able to answer. Answer in the face of these angels that are described as causing trauma when you see them and when you're in their presence, because that's what they're meant to do. Can you keep your faith? Can you keep your belief? Or is it shaky? That's what it's meant to test. If you can show that you were generally of that group, then your Alam al-Barzakh and your existence in Barzakh will be of that type. That's what it's meant for. Okay? So this is something to keep in mind. That Alam al-Barzakh is meant for the high-level belief items and the high-level teachings, practical teachings of Islam. Not the details. The details, everything's to the afterlife. The second point is that it does not take away from anything about the point we made, which is your ability to act ends the moment you leave this world. So in this way, it is no different. You are stuck with whatever you put in this world, whether you are in Alam al-Barzakh or Alam al-Akhirah. You have no other opportunities to act once you have reached the moment of death. So this is a key takeaway that inshallah is clear. If you are able to leave good things behind from which you continue to benefit in Alam al-Barzakh, that's different. You're no longer acting, but you did something so good and you left it in the world and it continues to have a good benefit. Human beings can still benefit from that which you left in the world. Then when you are in your Alam al-Barzakh, you are going to continue to benefit from that which you left behind. This becomes completely different in the afterlife because they're completely disconnected. When you are in Alam al-Barzakh, there are still human beings benefiting or being harmed by whatever you put in this world. So this is also something, if you want to, if I can present it this different way, I would say be strategic. Don't just work for the immediate. There are things you do, those are great. When you pray all alone in your room and no one knows, that is absolutely great. But if you understand how this world works and how al-Barzakh works and how the afterlife works, be strategic in that you also have things that if there are gaps and there are deficiencies and there are lacks in those things which you did, and maybe you cannot rely on them 100%, who amongst us can say, all my prayers are perfect, and all of my fasting is perfect, and all of my charity and zakah and khums are perfect, and all of my help to others is perfect, I'm good. I don't need anything else. No one can say that. So what do you need? You need to leave good things behind in this world. So that when you're gone, those things continue. You invest in them and they keep bringing you revenue when you're done and you've left this world. And this is the insistence on raising good children, because that means you kept your descendants going on a straight path. You have saved people so much trouble and so much energy by making sure that they are good, that their parents are good, that their ancestors are good, because it's so much easier to continue on the path of good. You're raised in a good family, in a good community, in a good society. Imagine the difference between that and someone who has to go against the current and find the guidance on their own. And it's going to be hit and miss. And that's why you get so much reward for raising good children, who will most likely remember you and who will pray for you. They will appreciate the sacrifices you made, the energy you put in, you left in this world, so that when they finally open their eyes and they're mature, they are realizing what you did, so that they are good people. And they will pray for you. And those prayers will reach you. That's why you are asked to build mosques and places of worship. You're asked to spread knowledge, write a book, give sermons, give speeches, give lectures, spread good in this world, make infographics, create YouTube videos, do whatever you can. Spread the knowledge and spread the good. Do things that people remember you as having done good. Even if they don't know it was you. There's a good in the world that came from someone. And sometimes, if it's done for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with sincere intentions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses that little bit that you put in, and it grows, and it multiplies, and it amplifies. And right now it's affecting 10 people. In 200 years it might be affecting 1 million. You don't know. And all of that reward is coming back to you. And this is why there's such an insistence, for instance, on the position, on the rank of a scholar. Because the work that they're doing is affecting that many more people. They're not only concerned with themselves. They are participating in influencing a lot of people. So whatever is happening later, they are getting a share of that reward. And it comes with a responsibility. Every time they make a mistake or they deviate, then of course, if they led people astray, then they are also responsible for leading people astray. Okay, that's everything in life. But as we said, the point in all of this is, do not forget that there is a connection between this world and Alam al-Barzakh. You cannot leave this world without having thought about your existence in the next realm. And as we said, we don't know how long it will last. If we're going to exist in that, if you live in this world 80 years or 120 years or 200 or 500 years, and then you're going to spend 2 million years in Alam al-Barzakh, I think you need to think about what's happening in Alam al-Barzakh and what have you done specifically for Alam al-Barzakh, in addition to the things that you have done just to go there ready for the afterlife. What else have you done? So that that goodness keeps coming to you while you're there. So that others remember you and pray for you and gift you and so on and so forth. The other point that we mentioned is that do also think about the fact that the variety, the variance, as they say in the world of business and math, the variance is very great. It's not like everyone is going to be lumped into kind of only two possible outcomes. Everybody's going to go in this room or that room. No. There is a huge variance in the permissions you are given, the accesses you are given, the experiences you are given, and both sides. It's not like everything is reduced. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is one thing that He doesn't allow. He says, how can we deal with or treat darkness and light in the same way? How can we treat ignorance and knowledge in the same way? This is in the Quran. So, of course, two people where one person has done a little bit more effort, a little bit more energy, a little bit more sincerity, is going to be seeing and experiencing that little bit more than the other. This is not lost. So, whatever you're doing for yourself. It's only improving you. improving the permissions you have, improving the state you're in. Okay, so that's why we need to remember there is a great variance. And it will be too late the moment you reach that. Okay, so don't be of those that regret. Again and again, as we saw in the Quran. One way to understand all of this, I mentioned it a couple of times, but just to wrap all of this up, a lot seems to be happening in Alam al-Barzakh. It's difficult to understand. Is it physical? Is it not physical? We said there are bodies, but it's a spiritual world. Perhaps one way to understand all of this in a summary format is to say that Alam al-Barzakh is like being in a state of dream. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself connected us back to the world of sleeping in the Quran, there is perhaps a reason for that. And we actually have that in some narrations where the Imams tell us that it is as though you are sleeping and dreaming. While you are in a state of sleeping and dreaming, you may not realize that you're asleep. It seems very real to you. It's only when you wake up that you realize, and sometimes you even have doubts. It was so real that you're not even sure, was it a dream or did this really happen? Okay, so while you're in it, well, one way to understand everything happening there is to say it's like you're in a state of dreaming. And that's enough. The effect of it is still happening. It's one type of existence. We're not saying it's the same sleep that we are sleeping now, because the detachment between the body and the soul has taken place. But it is like. So is there a body? Yes, there's a body. Is it physical? No. Are things happening? Of course. Are you feeling them? Are you experiencing them? Yes. Is it physical and material? No. That's all you need. Everything else can fall into place after that. Okay, so that's one way to kind of just have an analogy, what this may look like in this world. A point to keep in mind is that if you look at Alam al-Barzakh, whether you look at the punishment and the torture and the pain and the discomfort, or you look at the pleasure, the delight, the bliss, on both sides, the degree of intensity is a lot more than anything we can experience in this life. So this is a rule we have to keep in mind. And, if I can just quickly, as a footnote or between two brackets, to mention that this has to do with the fact that it's all happening in a spiritual world, because matter is limited. When things happen to you, and they're happening to your body only is limited or can cope with, deal with, things that your nervous system can deal with. You're limited by that. In a spiritual realm, in a spiritual dimension, you're no longer bound by what your nervous system can deal with. Okay? And that's why you start understanding that what you're making the soul undergo can be a lot more intense, both in pleasure and in pain, than anything your body will ever handle in this world. Okay? When we compare anything happening in this world, so now I'm not talking about you being alive, I'm talking about this whole realm of existence, including Alam al-Barzakh. When you compare it to the afterlife, then that's insignificant. And the amount, the degree, the intensity of pleasure and pain is also incomparable. What happens in Alam al-Barzakh, as intense as it is compared to Alam al-Dunya in our world, it's nothing compared to the afterlife. And this is clear in the verses of the Quran, as we saw. When it talks about, here being a minor humiliation and a minor torture and a minor punishment, and the true one is the afterlife. On both sides, it says the life is the afterlife. Here, this is not even a life. You're not even really fully alive. When you study biology, they tell you, when you study a virus, they tell you we're not sure, do we classify it as a living entity or as a inanimate, dead entity? Because viruses are not alive on their own. They have to take over an entity that has life, and they become alive. And they act. They have agency. They do something only as part of another entity, like a bacteria, like a cell, like an organism. But if you take it out, it continues to exist indefinitely. You can break them in space, you can freeze them. Nothing happens to a virus in this way. It can exist forever on its own, nothing happens. Because it's not alive. It only becomes, okay, so the same thing can be said here, that it's a state in between. Okay? The last point is that, inshallah, at the end of all of this, the two big takeaways that we take, the first one is that we need to prepare. You cannot know all of this and then do nothing about it. This is all a call to action. This is all equals, it needs to translate into action. So based on everything we said, inshallah, we touched on enough things that you on your own know where you need to go and act. But there's a need for action. This is not just an accumulation of knowledge. It's not just, let's understand what Islam says about this and it stops. This is what Islam says about Alam al-Barzakh, but there's a point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made in the Holy Quran, that the Holy Prophet and Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam have made in their narrations, to present things in this way. To present things in either a very attractive way, so that you actually do something to go get it. It's so delightful and it's so attractive that you cannot just ignore it. Or in a way that is so fearsome, so scary, so horrible, that you have to do something to make sure this doesn't happen to you. This is clear from the verses of the Quran, from the narrations that we saw, and this is we're only still talking about Alam al-Barzakh. We haven't talked about the afterlife. So all of this, the point from all of this is not just to know. Knowing is great. We need to match the actions to knowing. Okay, not just knowing. That's first point. The second point is, and this one it can be very difficult, but something to keep in mind and remind yourselves of, and myself of, all the time, is to try to find the right balance. So there's a first level of balance which is between fear and hope. We have in our narrations that the true believer, the heart of the true believer, has an equal amount of fear and hope. You cannot have so much fear that it completely paralyzes and depresses you. But you also cannot have so much hope that you go to the afterlife or you go to Alam al-Barzakh just with hope. This is an empty hope. If you had more fear, you would have probably acted more. But you just went there with hope. You haven't done anything else. You need an equal amount of both. And finding the equal amount is probably not going to be, as they say, a perfect science, nor is it going to be something constant. You will have moments where you will have a lot more fear, and you will have moments where you'll have a lot more hope. But generally speaking, as a believer, you have to go between the two. You have to, on the one side, remember your shortcomings, your mistakes, your sins. And so this brings fear into you, and hopefully action. And you have to remember, despite all of this, there is the mercy of God. And there is the forgiveness of God. And it's always there. I just need to turn towards it. But I can't turn towards it and rely on it without recognizing that there are shortcomings and I need to fix them. Okay? So this is one. The second one is that now the whole theme or topic that we've been focusing on is the topic of the afterlife. In these couple of lectures, it's been on the Alam al-Barzakh, but we've started talking a lot more in depth about death. And inshallah, this is going to continue. We're going to start focusing a lot more on, so what happens next? What does the afterlife, what happens to this world? What happens in the afterlife? What are those big milestones? What's the sequence of events happening there? So we're not done with the topic of the afterlife. In fact, that's going to be our entire focus for a number of lectures to come. So here's where we need to find the balance once again. We've put aside talking about how we're supposed to act in this world. And a lot of what we do has a afterlife dimension, has a manifestation, a representation, a meaning, a significance for the afterlife. Our religion does not allow for a human being, does not want a human being to be only and only looking at the afterlife. Our religion wants us to look at the afterlife through this life. You have to turn this life into your opportunities to move into the afterlife. You cannot just say, I will only work for the afterlife. Ultimately, that's what you are doing. And that's, you've reached the perfection. If you are able to, that everything that you do, everything you touch, everything you think about, everything you perform in this world, you've actually been able to make it into a means to the end, to the ultimate end, which is the afterlife. Your life is a process of getting there. The more you know and the more you work on yourself, the more you start seeing that everything you have, every moment you have, every dollar you have, every piece of health that you have, every organ that you have, everything that you've been given, every relationship that you have, is supposed to be used for the afterlife. How much of that can you turn into the afterlife? That's up to you. But the meaning of all of this is not to say, I will only look at the afterlife. No, you have to look at this world and use this world and live in this world and take advantage of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I have created the good things of this world. Inshallah, we're going to talk about that. For those who are believers. The things that are good in this life, they've been created for the believers, but they will be exclusively for them in the afterlife. In the afterlife, no one else will share it with them. In this world, everybody shares those things that are good and those things that are bad, because they're not exclusively to them. They're for everyone to enjoy as opportunities for the afterlife. So we're not saying you prevent yourself from, no one is going to work, no one is going to study, no one is going to do anything that builds this life, that builds a community, that builds a society, that makes humanity move forward. In fact, that's what you're supposed to do. But maybe someone else, they're trying to do that so that people say this was a great scientist. And they have a statue, and they have a street named after them, or a university campus, or so on and so forth. You're doing it because you have a higher, transcendental belief and value. You believe that God created you to do that. It just goes without saying that this is how everybody's supposed to be. So when you're doing it, you have a lofty, noble reason for doing it. But you still do it, and you do it better, and you will have a lot more drive than the next person who's doing it, and their entire outlook is based on the material life that they're living. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, and I'm thinking that I'm going to stop entirely. We're not going to go through the sermon. Maybe we'll leave it to next time, because I think it does require a bit of going through. It's a few pages long, perhaps 3 pages long if I want to read it quickly. So I'm going to leave it to another time. If people say, please read it, and they want to hear it, otherwise I can just reference it. It's Sermon 220 from Nahj al-Balagha. So unfortunately, I haven't seen really good translations of Nahj al-Balagha. But generally speaking, if you find the translations of Sermon 220, that's the sermon that I was going to go through quickly to kind of wrap up the topic, but it would require a little bit of time. I don't want to take too long on this. So we'll stop here. This is the end of the lecture part. If there are any questions, concerns, comments, online or in person, please don't hesitate to share them. And for the time being, وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
وأنتم.